Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that I would find myself caught in such a complicated and unforeseen situation. It all began in the heart of a quaint little town, where I had spent my younger years nurturing ambitions of a life filled with simplicity and joy. During the vibrant days of our youth, I made a promise to my college sweetheart, Jack. Our bond was forged in the warmth of shared dreams and common goals. Despite having so little, we found that our connection was priceless. And for a time, that seemed like more than enough to carry us forward. Looking back now, it's easy to see the subtle signs of what was coming, though they weren't clear to me at the time. The moments we shared seemed perfect, full of promise and optimism. But everything changed in an instant, and I struggled to process it. When Jack and I first moved into the charming house we had rented, I met Mr. Morgan, the man who owned the property. Though the house itself wasn't grand, it had a special charm that made it feel like home. The warmth of the place, its cozy garden, and the little backyard that captured my heart. It was the perfect setting for a fresh start. We stepped into this new chapter of our lives with excitement and anticipation. Jack and I were ready to settle into our routine, but I hadn't yet realized how deeply this seemingly simple decision would impact me. Mr. Morgan was an older man, just beginning the journey into his 60s. His face was warm, always adorned with a kind smile whenever we saw him. He was the type of landlord who checked in every now and then, just to make sure everything was in order with the house. I appreciated his visits at first. They felt polite and harmless. But, over time, I began to notice how frequently Mr. Morgan would stop by. Initially, it was for routine checks on the house, but his presence soon became more frequent, often under the guise of a casual chat. Jack's work kept him away from home more and more, and I found myself alone in the quiet of the house. At first, I didn't mind his visits. After all, he was just the landlord, and his conversations seemed harmless enough. Yet, as the weeks passed, I began to notice a shift. Mr. Morgan's visits, though still polite, started to feel more personal. They occurred more often, and he began to linger longer than necessary. I found myself alone in the peaceful solitude of our home, and gradually, Mr. Morgan's presence started to affect me in ways I couldn't ignore. He would come by unannounced, sometimes to check the house, other times just to chat. I didn't think much of it at first, but a strange feeling began to grow within me. One afternoon, I was tending to the flowers in the garden, lost in the simplicity of the task. It was a quiet, peaceful moment, until Mr. Morgan appeared at the gate. His visits had become a more regular occurrence, and while I had once welcomed his company, there was now an undercurrent of discomfort I couldn't dismiss. He had a way of making the space feel warmer, almost as if his presence filled it with an intensity I hadn't expected. On this particular day, he seemed more present. His usual friendly demeanor was still there, but there was a look in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Something deeper, more intense. As we chatted about the weather and the beauty of the garden, I noticed how much he focused on me. "Do you find joy in this place?" he asked, his gaze steady, almost piercing. The question caught me off guard, and I felt an uneasy shiver run down my spine. I hesitated before answering, unsure of what to say. Yes, Jack brought me happiness, but the longer he was away for work, the more I found myself feeling isolated in that house. Even when he was home, there were moments when I felt a distance between us. Yet I couldn't bring myself to voice these feelings to Mr. Morgan. Instead, I smiled, trying to brush the thought aside. But Mr. Morgan wasn't content with my brief response. His words lingered in the air long after he left, as though they had imprinted themselves on my mind. "Sometimes, we underestimate the importance of someone to confide in," he said, his tone soft, yet insistent. The weight of his words hung in the silence, and I found myself unsettled by the conversation. I told myself it was nothing, just an old man making conversation, but deep down, I knew something had shifted. As the days turned into weeks, Mr. Morgan's behavior continued to evolve. What had once been light, innocent compliments began to feel heavier, more calculated. He would comment on my appearance, noticing the small details, how I kept the house in order, how I took care in presenting myself. At first I assumed these remarks were just part of his courteous nature, but I began to realize that he noticed things others did not. His attention to detail, his observations, they made me feel uncomfortable, though I couldn't explain why. One evening, when Jack was away on a business trip, I found myself sitting alone on the couch, reading a book. The house was quiet, and the stillness felt heavier than usual. Suddenly the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I hesitated for a moment before I stood up to answer. When I opened the door, there stood Mr. Morgan, his warm smile greeting me as though he had every right to be there. I was in the neighborhood, he said. Thought I'd stop by and make sure everything's going well. I stepped back to let him in, not wanting to be rude. It wasn't unusual for him to stop by, though his visits were becoming more frequent. Once inside, he began our usual conversation, but this time, there was an odd tension in the air. The usual lightness was missing, replaced with a lingering sense of discomfort that neither of us could fully ignore. His smile never faltered, but something about his presence made the room feel different, as if the air itself was charged with something unspoken. There was a certain intensity in his gaze that left me feeling uneasy. It was nothing overt, just a fleeting look, a lingering gaze, yet it was enough to set my heart racing wildly in the course of our dialogue. Mr. Morgan drew closer to me than was his usual custom. The space that had once kept us apart started to shrink, and the weight of his presence became ever more palpable. I remember laughing nervously at his remarks, trying to brush aside the growing discomfort that nestled within my heart. I comforted myself with the notion that his actions were simply expressions of camaraderie, persuading myself that my responses were overblown, yet as if sensing my discomfort. Mr. Morgan leaned in slightly and placed his hand gently on the arm of the couch, He remarked, "It's a rare thing to come across someone like you, a person who truly listens, a person who sincerely cares at first glance." The words seemed innocuous, but an unsettling quality lingered in his tone, a particular inflection that sent a shiver racing down my spine. An overwhelming desire to withdraw surged within me, a need to voice my unease, yet I chose to remain mute instead. I released a nervous laugh and pulled my legs up to my chest, trying to create a barrier between yes, even if it was just a physical one. Mr. Morgan noted the shift in my posture, and for a brief instant, an unvoiced tension lingered in the atmosphere surrounding us. He looked at me, his eyes soft, but there remained a sharp intensity that I could not ignore. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he murmured, his voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "Your gratitude is genuinely cherished. Ella, you embody a truly distinctive and extraordinary spirit." The way he spoke my name rendered me momentarily speechless. My heart pounded fiercely in my chest, rendering me speechless. I longed to speak to break the heavy stillness that enveloped us, but the perfect words slipped through my fingers. In that moment, I was captivated and rendered motionless by the sheer gravity of time. Before I could even speak, Mr. Morgan stood up with a smile, gracing his lips once more. He commented, "I suppose I should allow you to return to your evening yet." An oddity lingered in the smile, an elusive quality that slipped through my grasp of understanding. "Wanted to connect and inquire about your well-being." I knotted my throat dry and watched him as he left the house. With the soft click of the door closing behind him, I exhaled a breath I hadn't known I was holding. I sat still, my eyes locked on the door, while time appeared to elongate endlessly. Wrestling with the perplexing occurrences that had just transpired, never had I encountered such a deep and unsettling conflict. Within myself, a part of me longed to share my inner turmoil with Jack, but another part was caught in the web of shame, paralyzed by the fear of how he might perceive me. I never meant to stir up any trouble, I sought to steer clear of, sowing any seeds of uncertainty in his thoughts, or even more perilously inciting his wrath as I continued to reflect. It became ever more apparent that I could no longer ignore the feelings. Mr. Morgan was igniting within me. A sense of wrongness enveloped me, and I found no inclination to nurture it. An unsettling intuition persisted, hinting that his visits masked deeper truths he opted to keep hidden. What was I destined to accomplish? As the days unfolded, Mr. Morgan's visits became more and more routine. Each time I returned, the same unsettling tide of discomfort and unease enveloped me anew. I tried to brush it aside, but it became ever more challenging to ignore. He had a mysterious allure that quickened my pulse, leaving me bewildered by its source. I recognized the importance of being careful, knowing that I could not let situations slip out of my grasp. Yet I felt that, Jackie, the surface, a subtle transformation was quietly taking shape. I had no inkling of the profound depths that lay in wait for me as the days transformed in 2 weeks. The tension between Mr. Morgan and me grew ever more palpable. I had not yet confided in Jack about the strange encounters I had with our landlord. A part of my essence quivered at the notion that he might fail to understand my intentions, or even more terrifyingly, that he could react with fury and disillusionment. Ultimately, I was simply trying to offer a gesture of goodwill, wasn't I? It was nothing more than a light exchange of words. Is that all there is? Then. I recited that mantra to myself each time Mr. Morgan appeared at the house unannounced, striving to quell the growing unease that was slowly taking hold. Nevertheless, the discomfort had transformed into an inescapable reality that I could no longer ignore. The memory of Mr. Morgan remained vivid, especially the moment our eyes locked, and as our conversation continued. There was a subtle shift in the space between us. During that one extraordinary visit, it seemed he was extending his hand, striving to create a connection that went beyond the typical confines of neighborly or landlord-tenant interactions. That moment kept resurfacing in my mind, each recollection, amplifying the tension within me. On a tranquil Tuesday evening, I found myself alone in the kitchen, carefully slicing vegetables in anticipation of dinner. Cooking had always been a source of joy for me. However, tonight it felt more like a burden than a refuge. My thoughts drifted to far-off lands, an uneasy feeling tugging at my consciousness as thought. The very atmosphere was alive with the anticipation of transformation. As I started to dust the chicken with spices, the familiar sound of the doorbell resonated in the atmosphere. My heart danced within my chest as I peered through the kitchen window. I caught sight of Mr. Morgan at the door, his well-known warm smile illuminating his features. Days had slipped by since I last beheld him, and though relief ought to have enveloped me, unsettling, not coiled tightly in my stomach, instead with a towel in hand. I dried my hands, took a deep breath, and made my way toward the door. "Good evening," Ella, Mr. Morgan said, with a bright tone as I opened the door. "I hope I'm not interrupting any current affairs." "Absolutely not," I replied, managing to conjure a smile. I stepped aside to allow him passage, and he entered with a nonchalance that implied it was the most mundane action conceivable. He glanced around swiftly, his eyes briefly settling on the kitchen, where I'd been immersed in the task of preparing dinner. "The aroma in here is delightful." He commented, his gaze resting on the dish I was crafting. I received the compliment with a courteous note, a wave of uncertainty washing over me as I pondered my response. "It's just a simple dinner. Nothing particularly special." "You always say that," Mr. Morgan chuckled, "but you have a remarkable talent for transforming the simplest things into something truly extraordinary." The compliment was agreeable, I suppose, but it bore a distinct significance when it originated from him. It was a different kind of admiration than what I had garnered from friends, or even from Jack. His gaze carried a weight as if he glimpsed something within me that went beyond the simple worries of food. At a roof over my head, a tide of discomfort surged within me. Once again, yet I resolved to push the feeling away. "Thank you," I replied, brushing it aside with a casual wave of my hand. "Do you need anything? It seems you have arrived with a question in mind, am I correct?" Mr. Morgan's expression shifted ever so slightly. He seemed to hesitate briefly before responding. "I would appreciate the opportunity to engage in a short discussion. A considerable period has elapsed since we last partook in a substantial conversation. To my utter surprise, our meetings had consistently been characterized by courteous interactions, yet we had never paused to delve into a more profound conversation. I had noticed his regular appearances nearby, but I never expected him to seek a deeper dialogue. A wave of anxiety washed over me, but I nodded nonetheless. "Certainly, we can pause for a moment to share some time together." I led him into the living room, subtly gesturing toward the couch, inviting him to settle in and find his comfort. I sat across from him, nestled in the familiar chair that had become my designated perch. During those evenings, when Jack and I would immerse ourselves in our television traditions, a tense silence blanketed the room until Mr. Morgan shattered the quiet, his voice imbued with a gravity I had never witnessed in him. Prior to this moment, he commenced his journey at a relaxed tempo. Of late, I've been immersed in profound contemplation regarding the essence of existence and the inexorable changes that manifest as time progresses. It is all too easy to find oneself caught in the monotonous patterns of everyday existence, drifting away from the genuine essence of what truly matters. Uncertainty hung in the air as I contemplated the path he was choosing to follow with thoughtful deliberation. I acknowledged your viewpoint in the midst of life's tumult. Remaining connected to what genuinely holds significance can prove to be a formidable taskmaster. Morgan tilted his head, his eyes searching deep into mine. Exactly. Yet it is just as important to take a moment to pause and reflect, making certain that we are truly engaging with life, instead of simply going through the motions of a routine. His words bore a disquieting gravity, rendering me speechless in the face of how to respond. My thoughts were shrouded in uncertainty as I contemplated his insinuation, and a fragment of my being hesitated to reveal the truth. "Ella," he whispered softly, leaning in, just a fraction closer to her. "It's challenging to express. Yet from our very first encounter, an unmistakable bond has formed between us, a distinctive connection that remains ever present in my mind-time. And again, I find myself pondering our conversations, the way you carry yourself in them. I've noticed the thoughtful care you put into the smallest of tasks, and my respect for you is profound." A sudden constriction seized my throat. Stifling my breath, his words enveloped the listener in a soft embrace, while, simultaneously, echoing the profound significance of a newfound truth. The way he spoke those words struck my heart with a jolt, though it was anything but a pleasant feeling. Unexpected tide of confinement surged within me, casting doubt on my forthcoming actions. My thoughts flowed, seeking the perfect words, anything that could alleviate the oppressive tension, now palpable in the atmosphere. I find myself at a loss for words. I murmured, my voice scarcely lifting above a whisper. "I appreciate your thoughtful sentiments, Mr. Morgan, but I must convey that I am contentedly married. My heart is devoted to a husband I hold in the highest regard." He seemed completely untroubled by my words. He settled back in his chair, his gaze fixed on me for a fleeting instant, his expression an enigma. "I understand," he murmured, his voice tinged with a subtle trace of regret. "It is my desire to spare you any unease, Ella, but I find myself unable to dismiss the feelings that dwell within me." His words coursed through me, a spark of electricity awakening every nerve, though I had heard him express his admiration for me before. This moment carried a unique weight. Within his gaze resided a profound depth and intensity that conveyed unspoken narratives. A wave of trepidation and uncertainty enveloped me. This had surpassed the boundaries of a simple casual inquiry from a friendly landlord. It had transformed into a labyrinth of complexity, a realm I realized I was ill-prepared to traverse. "I have no intention of creating any discord between you and Your husband, Mr. Morgan, said, his voice unwavering yet. I can no longer pretend to be indifferent to the undeniable attraction. I feel for you. I felt compelled to share my emotions with you. Words slipped through my fingers. I opened my mouth, but the words slipped away from me. I found myself in a precarious situation, caught between the urge to shield him and the necessity of steering clear of false hopes. What path was I intended to follow in this situation? What is the best way to communicate to him that I am married and have no interest in pursuing anything outside of my relationship with Jack? Finally, I took a deep breath, sensing my heart pounding in my chest. Mr. Morgan, I declared with firm resolve, I value your candor, but I must be clear and direct with you. I stand united in the sacred bond of marriage, holy, devoted to my husband. Your kindness is genuinely valued. However, I feel it is important to clarify that my interest is strictly confined to the parameters of a landlord-tenant relationship. A prolonged stillness enveloped the space, and I caught the flicker of disappointment shimmering in his gaze. He lowered his eyes to his hands, then nodded with a thoughtful precision. I understand, he whispered gently. I sincerely regret if my actions have brought you any unease. That was never my intention. I nodded, a surge of relief washing over me. The tension that had once surrounded us seemed to dissipate, leaving behind a lingering sense of discomfort. In its aftermath, the feeling remained an inescapable burden, that nothing could revert to its previous condition. Mr. Morgan's feelings for me would endure, no matter how much I might wish to face them. He stood up and I followed suit. Thank you for listening, he said, his voice soft, carrying a hint of sadness. I will take my leave now and wish you a pleasant evening. Wish for you to know that I deeply respect your boundaries. Ella, I merely seek to express my emotions to you. I forced a smile, striving to mask the inner turmoil that persisted. Jackie, the surface. I express my gratitude. Mr. Morgan, I eagerly anticipate the moment our paths intertwined once more. As he crossed the threshold, I paused, my eyes lingering on the emptiness he had vacated. A whirlwind of ideas churned inside me. The events that had just unfolded were utterly beyond my grasp, even while bound in matrimony to Jack. I began to find myself reflecting on the nature of our conversations and the unexpected bond we had developed. What was unfolding around me, and why did it feel as if the very fabric of my existence was slowly unraveling? I shook, my head attempting to cast away the persistent uncertainties. I found myself drawn to the essence of my life with Jack, yearning to remember the love and devotion we once cherished. Still, an unyielding murmur deep within me hinted that this was just the inception of something far grander. After my conversation with Mr. Morgan, made a concerted effort to push the entire situation from my mind, my resolve to maintain my relationship with Jack was unwavering, and I had no intention of introducing any further complications with our landlord. Nevertheless, in spite of my attempts to mask my feelings, they remained stubbornly clinging to my heart. The burden of guilt and uncertainty lingered, casting a shadow over my thoughts and plunging me into an endless cycle of doubt regarding the meeting. A few days later, Mr. Morgan reemerged, surprising everyone once again. A sudden wave of unease washed over me as the doorbell's chime pierced the stillness. Despite my sense of unpreparedness for yet another challenging conversation, I recognized the necessity of facing it head-on. I eased the door ajar, endeavoring to uphold my composure. Salutations. Ella, he greeted me, his voice warm yet deliberate. I wish to connect and verify that all is well with the house. I tilted, my head summoning a smile. Everything is in order. Mr. Morgan, thank you for your question. He seemed to hesitate for a brief moment before continuing on. I have been contemplating my earlier expressions with great intensity. Causing you any discomfort was never my intention. I recognize your boundaries, and I respect them. I found myself compelled to articulate the thoughts swirling within me. I fixed my gaze upon him for a lingering moment, feeling the weight of the words he had spoken. In that moment, it was essential for me to stand my ground. Here uncertainty found no welcome. "Thank you for your understanding," I replied. "Nevertheless, I feel it is necessary to be clear. I am in a marriage. I am wholly committed to my marriage with Jack, and I shall not allow any distractions to disrupt this bond. While I value the professional relationship we have cultivated, it remains solely within that realm." Mr. Morgan's expression softened, though a hint of sadness remained in his eyes. He tilted his head slowly, absorbing my words in quiet contemplation. "I comprehend," he whispered gently. "I sincerely regret if I overstepped any limits," as I took a deep breath. A soothing wave of relief enveloped me. "It is entirely acceptable. I would like to ensure that we are on the same page." He gave a subtle, courteous nod before turning to leave, as he turned to depart. I remained in the threshold watching his exit, a tempest of feelings turning inside me. A subtle ache resided in my heart, recognizing the importance of this moment, while, simultaneously, a wave of gratitude unfurled for the boundaries I had so urgently needed to create as twilight descended. Jack and I convened at the dinner table, and in that instant, I felt a deep sense of presence that had slipped away from me. For far too long, the recent events weighed heavily on my thoughts, yet I recognized the importance of moving forward. I discovered a compelling attraction to the core of what genuinely holds significance, the essence of my family, my steadfast devotion to Jack, and the deep love that intertwined our lives. "Is all well?" Jack asked, noticing that I appeared more reserved than usual. I presented a smile, striving to dispel the relentless thoughts that clung to my consciousness. Truly immersed in deep thought, "Your return home fills my heart with joy." He reciprocated the smile, his hold on my hand becoming a touch firmer, returning to the familiar embrace of home brings, a soothing warmth that wraps around the soul. In that moment, it became clear to me that, amidst the tumult and complexities of human emotions, my focus was strikingly sharp. A deep sense of duty urged me to protect the connection I had with Jack. With unwavering resolve, I was determined to allow nothing and no one to hinder our journey, fully cognizant that, despite the obstacles that lay ahead, we would face them together.